Welcome to the episode. Today I will be co-presenting with fellow actor Sam Clemmett, and our guest today will be the incredible George MacKay. We'll be asking George, how did he get to where he is? The ups, the downs, the surprises, an honest chat about the industry and what the passing months have had in store for him. You may know him from films such as Captain Fantastic and Pride, and more recently his astonishingly performance in Sam Mendes' 1917.
It's a life and fail. 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 Woo!
Hey,
No, got there in the end.
Hey.
Sorry about that. So this is Sam.
Hey, Sam.
Hello, mate.
George, obviously.
Good, how are you?
Yeah, not too bad. Nice to meet you.
And you, mate, and you.
So we're still having technical difficulties. It keeps saying every time I start the meeting, don't know either of you have ever had this, but it keeps on saying audio is not recording. I mean, technology is just my absolute nightmare. It just...
Oh yeah, same. Useless.
So, like I was in such a tiz yesterday, just trying to track a parcel. I got the crossest I've been for a while. It's not fair. This is the thing with all these Ufuda stuff. We've got this what lovely stage manager to help us because oh god, all of the tech.
God, I can imagine that is a nightmare, man.
Oh god.
How many people is it usually all connected at once? Do you know?
Well, actually, the biggest one was our first one 2 weeks ago, and that was 135 people.
Wow.
And so, but like the thing was, did you see the first one? Invading everyone's in. Sorry, like Sam, this is these new writing nights that I do.
Yeah, Elliot mentioned to me the other week.
And we do them on Zoom now that, you know, with the lockdown and everything. And so they're just kind of like messaging friends, but it's kind of just, you know, invading your inbox every 2 weeks, going like, here's the link, you know, look out for the show. And sent this link out. And basically there's the 12 people sharing work are kind of participants, and then you have attendees, and then you have the host. And so we were given our links as participants, and then we send out a link to the attendees so that they just watch and they can't do anything, but they just see the show. It's beamed out to them. And we did a sound check on the Saturday and one on the Sunday. So I was like, don't send the Saturday link, but I sent my link to Sunday, which meant that there was 135 participants, which meant that suddenly it was like, you know, John Malkovich or something. There was like 100 and something people popping up, and Georgia, our stage manager, had no control over who was ordered. And also because it was through my email, everyone was called George. So she couldn't even just go to the names of the performers.
Oh my God.
So we had to kind of, I was on there like, come on, everyone, please mute, and put in the chat box, like, we're doing another meeting. If you click on this link, we'll start that one in 5 minutes and close this one. It was just like, oh God, it just felt sick. It was horrible.
Oh,
That's horrible. Well, at least we're not, you know, this isn't as complicated.
Oh, mate, I
We should be able to
completely
figure this out. George, thank you so much for coming on and having a chat. Really appreciate it. How have you been?
I've been good, thank you, man. Yeah, I've been really well. Just ticking on, all good, ticking on here.
We're just going to pretend that we didn't have a massive nightmare with the technology starting up and trying to record this and everything else. We haven't actually been talking for the last 25 minutes trying to get this to work. It's all good.
Well, I can completely sympathise if that was the case, because I am terrible with technology.
Exactly.
But we didn't. So
cut around it. It'll be lovely.
Yeah.
So I'm personally really intrigued by your career. I mean, from my knowing, you started very young, and I'd love to hear, how did that all begin? What was the kind of initiation for you?
Well, it was kind of by chance, to be honest. There was a wonderful casting lady called Shaheen Baig, who came around my school, and Shaheen cast loads. But she came around my school when I was 10, and she was doing a search, I think, you know, for actors, schools everywhere. It was like a big old search, and they were doing this the film Peter Pan, and so I was kind of with a group of boys from my school. We went along to a workshop as Lost Boys, and from that workshop, which was just like it was like a Saturday or something, we just played a bunch of drama games, and we sort of played around. And then from there were a few of us who were then you know, I'm sure there was a few of us. There was probably loads that, you know, we kind of got invited to the next stage with to do a reading, and basically did a couple of meetings reading for different Lost Boys, and then actually for a time they said we're going to look elsewhere because they were filming the film in Australia, and then after a wee while kind of came back and said, actually, would you like to play Curly, one of the Lost Boys? And so me and my mum and my sister went out to Australia for 8.5 months, like to do
Wow.
this film. So it was like, as a first experience on a film and what kind of film could be, it was amazing because it was just so much fun. We were a bunch of sort of 10 to 14-year-olds in make believe, you know, having like, you know, being on trampolines and sword fighting, and even the tutoring, they looked after us so well. It was just so much fun. And that was my first experience. And my parents, I believe it was as the job was happening, we had a friend of ours who was an actor, and they asked if we might speak to his agent to see if I could kind of have an agent just to help us through the process, because they was like, we've never done this, you know, before, just the logistics of it. And Catherine very, very kindly took me on, and after we had such a special experience, kind of said, can we stay on your books? And she very, very sweetly agreed. And I think as well that was a kind of quite fortuitous happening in some senses, because there's no sort of right or wrong sort of ways of doing things, but Catherine, I was the only child on her books, and so I kind of got put up for less stuff, but the stuff that I did was broadly adult projects, some children's television as well. And so I sort of was kind of, just by proxy of the situation, auditions and roles that I may have got were kind of, you know, the child within an adult story. And it just sort of, in hindsight, I think that was quite interesting, just being in those adult environments, watching adult actors. It was a kind of like, that was my entrance into it, so to speak. And then and my parents were always very kind of easygoing about the whole thing as well. If, you know, just do it as long as you enjoy it, kind of thing. And there was, and also that thing, the other thing that I think was a great chance happening was there was no pressure for a long time, and you know, as there shouldn't be. And you know, it can't help but, you know, you feel you put the pressure on yourself later on. But I was just kind of would go to an audition if there was one there. If it happened, fantastic. If it didn't, I was at school, and that was sort of the way into it. And then, you know, if I did get a job, it was usually a sort of a kind of wonderful experience, and you sort of learn by osmosis without thinking too much about it. And I think now, like, I'm a bit of an overthinker, and so I think I was really lucky that, you know, to the kind of the first experiences of it were so kind of relatively unconscious, so to speak.
Do you think I mean, that's an incredible way to go into it. And you say about the overthinking, and when we all do that. But yeah, I mean, what a way to start. And did it, obviously you were still at school, as you said. Did it affect, I mean, obviously going away for 8 months, that's a huge chunk of the year. But like, in terms of just in general with the auditions and with other jobs, did it affect your school? Did you get taken out a lot, or did it kind of fit in quite nicely?
To be honest, my school were really lovely about it, and I wasn't going away enough for it to be a problem. And also that Peter Pan was, I think, still the longest job I've ever done.
Really?
The first one was the biggest job, and like and so it was yeah, they were I mean, sometimes, you know, like my next job was 3 days after that. So it was kind of, there was no sort of through line as to the time away. But my school were always very lovely and kind of understanding to the idea that, you know, you may miss out on certain lessons, but as long as you try and keep up and do the work to keep up, you're going to get another form of education in just these sort of different experiences. So they were always very giving in that sense.
So did you have a desire to go into it at that point, or did the opportunity sort of arise at school and you just sort of went with it and ended up?
It was a bit of both, to be honest. Like, I think I really loved drama at school. Like, I loved sort of make believe, and also my parents, my mum wasn't working in the theatre when I was, after me and like she stopped just after me and my sister were born, or maybe just before. I can't remember exactly, but my both parents used to work in the theatre, and so that was the other thing, is it was quite a luxury with the amount of theatre that we got taken to as kids, just because that was sort of my mum and dad's world and what they enjoyed. And
What did
again,
they do, if you don't mind me asking, in the theatre? What was their
my mum was a costume supervisor and designer, and my dad was a stage manager and lighting designer.
Awesome.
And production manager for a while. And that's kind of how he sort of went into the work that he's, that he did for the, for the years since. But he, but just sort of by proxy of kind of their interest. And again, like that's some of the sort of unconscious luxuries of like, when you get older and you start, a mixture is like, when you get older, you start doing the overthinking, and then you start paying for your own tickets as well. Like I was really amazed with some of the stuff that we got taken to. Like my mum used to work in the ballet as well. So not often, but I remember being a kid and seeing a couple of ballets and I think at the time it wasn't like, oh, what? But there was a sort of, I have thought since, like actually the kind of things that I find kind of quite physically extraordinary performances fascinating. Like, and I think that's from like memory of seeing like dancers and things like that, where you kind of go, oh my God, that's not a trick. They've just jumped that high.
Crazy.
And that sort of as an idea is kind of interesting, and just in terms of like the performances that are exciting, I've kind of gone, they've actually done that, and that's what's amazing about it, is that they've pushed it, and and I don't know, like if it's just sort of sensitivity to my parents' interests as well, but so in terms of school, it didn't. Tried to just sort of was just sort of at school when I was at school, really, and was also very lucky to kind of with the you do tutoring on set, and I was very lucky that because there was a few jobs where I was one of the only children on set, that I had a dear friend of mine, Russ, who was a tutor from one of the jobs when I was younger. Ended up, we kind of went together on jobs, so I kind of, that consistency as well as a mate,
that's nice.
was really special. And we had a really good kind of working relationship as sort of teacher student as much as anything as well, which kind of and there's sort of peaks and troughs to, like, obviously you're missing out on the social environment of not being in a class full of your classmates, but when you're one-on-one, those hours are more concentrated, so you manage to keep up with certain things because you're just because the ratio is different. So I've been so lucky with so many things, and so many things that just worked out the way that they did. And I think and also my parents as well, kind of credit to them to sort of for sort of seeing that opportunity of kind of go, okay, it'd be great if like Russ, you guys go together. And so I didn't feel going away far away when you were a kid as well. I had my chaperone as well, who was a friend of the family, who we met on a job, and she was chaperoning another young actress that was on the job. And then for a few jobs, again, when I was the only kid and my mum couldn't come away, I went with Vicky. And so I kind of had almost like a little team of mates that you feel safe with, which again, I think stops you kind of getting lost in an experience.
Yeah, for sure. That's a nice, it's the familiarity, isn't it? And having that team around you, was it strange when you made the transition from like being a kid on set to being an adult, and suddenly I guess there was a moment where it's like you didn't have that team around you necessarily, and you were going onto a job on your own? Was that a strange transition?
To be honest, it was really, really exciting. I remember I had a job, because it was really thrilling, having had a few experiences as the youngest person on set, and and to be honest, there's a tiny bit of there's a tiny bit of, I guess, self-awareness that you're like, I'm the youngest one here, so it's kind of like it's a bit of a get out of jail free card kind of thing, not to misbehave, but just as a sort of safety net of like, people are often as they should be, like kind of sweet to you if you're a wee kid. But then you're sort of like, right, I'm here on my own terms, I'm here on my own clock, and I'm here as me, and it was a really, and to feel adult was actually a really exciting feeling. I really enjoyed it, and the social side of things as well, even going out on jobs as well, like that was suddenly you kind of go, I'm old enough to be at the pub. Like, you know, it sounds so kiddie when you say it, but just the enjoyment of like, should we go for a pint on Friday? Like,
I mean,
yeah, or just,
there's such a huge social element to this job. I think,
yeah,
regardless of it being on, you finish a performance on stage and you go to the pub afterwards, or after you wrap, you go to the pub and you sort of debrief after the day and let it all go behind you. I feel it's such a huge part of what we do.
yeah, it's completely like the kind of, and you make friends that are your own because it's
Yeah.
only you there. And yeah, it's sort of, I to be honest, I noticed it like a little later on as well, where I think because, you know, sometimes you're playing younger than you are. It's kind of, it's because I think there's that period of time where it's, especially me, kind of is rather lacking in facial hair. Like you kind of, you sort of, you might be in your mid-20s playing a early 20s or a late teens or something like that. And they're suddenly being in the last few years, I've kind of noticed that thing of going, oh, even then you kind of, for a while, you might be the youngest person on set. You kind of go, no, I'm now sort of like, you know, your peer group, you're the same age as the crew. And it's not that you can kind of, even at 19, when you're there on your own and you're, you know, you're an adult, a working adult, but by the same token, you're still the youngest because you're a teenager. You're kind of like, now you're like, no, I'm 26, and you know, the focus pull is 22. Like,
Yeah.
you know, that's when you sort of really feel the shift of like, I'm an adult now. And also having been younger and witnessing people who I was like, they are men and women, and they're 21, you know, but because I was 15 and looked up to them so much, you go, oh wow, like they must have actually
Yeah.
been quite young in themselves. Like I remember being 21 and you kind of go, oh, I thought I'd be so much more sussed out than I am now. You know, but so
Do people think that you're, because I feel like you are ageless. I feel like you've been around forever. And it feels like you just haven't aged. Like I mean, you could still play like 20, I reckon.
Yeah, I don't know. I sort of,
Do people think you're younger than you are? In fact, I don't even know. Come on, you must be pushing 40 now. You've been around some time.
I'm 63 actually. Yeah. And I don't know. It's sort of,
You look great, George.
oh, well, thank you. It's this, yeah. One of
regime.
kind of like one of veg juice drip or something. But, yeah. All the cod liver oil. Yeah, I don't know. It's sort of, but then again, it's, you know, it's funny. As I get older, I feel like, you know, it's quite a young assumption to assume that adults are completely, you know, settled. Or, you know, at any point in your life, I think people are kind of reevaluating, or, you know, your context changes, or, you know, people are also like, even in jobs, when you look at characters and suddenly you're kind of reading characters now kind of going, the point of this character is that they are crumbling inside of this, you know, they're the head of a bank, or they're the head of a kind of family, or they're a kind of like, they're the strongest member of the, you know, the crew, in whichever context they're at. And then, but the interesting thing about them is that they're crumbling inside because they were sort of, and you start to kind of go, well, what about, you know, I've felt, you know, like times like that where you kind of go, well, I'm the older brother, but actually, no, I don't know so much. Or you look at the people around you and you kind of, the members of society or groups that you know that are in control, and you go, actually, maybe you're not as in control. Like it's sort of, I don't know, age is a funny thing, like, because you meet some people in all walks of life, but especially kind of in the context of like being on sets or on jobs and in theaters and stuff. Some people who are really have a beautiful youthful spirit right up into their old age, and then some people who are very wise when they're very young. Like it's sort of, I don't know, there's kind of, it sounds, well, it is a sort of like bumper sticker thing of age is just a number, but I don't know, I think it kind of, it is and it is and it isn't. It's like,
Yeah,
that's
I
not
mean,
really an answer, but
especially it's interesting because it is like that, especially in the film industry. I think when you, especially, you notice it in American films as well. You have people that you're watching, you're thinking they're meant to be at high school. That guy is definitely 40. Like, I think the industry, it affords that, doesn't it? It gives you actors get to play, even if it's not totally believable. You get to play a range of ages, and as you say, like, I think as a kid I was more together, think like, than, you know, as an adult you're like, you look at all these people, as you say, and you go, oh, they've got it together, they're sussed out.
Mm.
Actually, I think you, as you say, you overthink it and you become less together as you get older.
Yeah.
And then the aim is to actually get that childlike greenness and actually
Yeah.
just have fun with it on set and
Yeah.
strive for that, really.
Yeah.
But for you, I mean, obviously you said your parents, they're an obvious influence, and having worked in the theatre, did you, growing up, obviously your parents, but was there anyone else that particularly kind of guided you, and you say about your chaperones as well?
In terms of work, or just
Yeah, in terms of, you know, getting to where you are now and inspiring you at a young age.
I think probably my drama teacher at school, Mr. Senior School, Parker. Like it's just his approach was just so open and so fun, and he kind of demanded a respect for the material, but also a genuine love of like absurd stuff as well, like absurd theatre, and kind of like, yeah, quite absurdist tastes, I think, as well. But his kind of respect and reverence for those kind of absurd plays or characters or ways of performing were really inspiring. You know, because it kind of just made you take it seriously. He wouldn't laugh at it, like he wouldn't not have a sense of humor about it.
Mm-hmm.
Just also as a man, like his interests were so kind of eclectic, and he valued stuff which other people might laugh at, and that just very simply, I think, and it coupled with the experience that he gave us, like at school, he did an abridged version of Romeo and Juliet that was set in a mental hospital for people affected by love, where their treatment was to reenact Romeo and Juliet every day, but
Wow.
but the whole set was made out of pillows, you know, because it was or the balconies became beds, and he kind of just his tastes in theatre and making, and he's now a
That's
writer.
amazing.
He's now a full-time writer, is no longer teaching at the school that I went to, but then we had such a good time with that, and he then took us up to Edinburgh, you know, as a bunch of 14, 15-year-olds, took a whole gang of us and had us play at the Edinburgh Fringe, and
Amazing.
like
amazing.
and flyering. He's like, right, well, flyering's gonna you know, there's everyone in Edinburgh is flyering, so you need to kind of get their attention. So he's like, well, the set's made of pillows, and that's what the thing was, the conceit of a kind of, I guess it's like sort of the padded cells, you know, then became the pillows, became the swords that they would fight with, and we'd have pillow fights. So we'd go out in costume and start pillow fights in the street, you know, as a means to try and get people to come see our show. And the first night we had a full house, and then I think we also played to an audience of 3, and like just as an experience of that, of like, all right, this is what it is. It's like, this is what like the Fringe is all about, is playing to an audience of 3 people, but still doing that show. And like,
Yeah.
And just that thing of then also feeling that mixture of feeling like kind of young adults, because you're 15 years old, and, you know, I'm in Edinburgh, like, you know, like sort of, and going to see shows as well, and being encouraged to see shows, and but then also by the same token he would encourage the respect for the material, that you're there when you're called, and you know, you're he just sort of had a very well-rounded kind of approach to it, and appreciation for everything. So I think Parker was and is a huge influence.
Are
you still in touch with him?
That's amazing.
Yeah, I am.
Oh, that's brilliant. Love that.
So, yeah, he sounds like so you say he's writing now?
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, because I mean that's a pretty, for a school to put on a play that kind of absurd, like that, to think that far out of the box. That's amazing.
For a school to take you to the Edinburgh Fringe, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean,
that's never have got the opportunity.
We were so lucky, so lucky. But he's just he's a special man, Parker. He's a special man. So I'd say Parker, and yeah.
It's what you always hope for, isn't it? Having there was always a teacher at my school. There was one guy that whenever you did a play, you didn't care what anyone else thought about it. You waited for him to come over and go, that was great. You just respected him. And there was a teacher like that for me as well. And it's someone that takes you seriously at an age where they didn't necessarily have to when you were doing these plays, but he would give you a full review like he was the Radio Times.
Yeah.
and it, you know, it means a lot, especially at that age.
But I think that's the thing. It's a kind of, it's unconscious, but it's respecting, you know, that we were 14 and he treated us absolutely as equals, you know.
Absolutely.
And he didn't say, I'm treating you as equals. He just did. And it kind of gives it, and it makes you respect yourself and what you're doing all the more, because, like, you know, because he took it seriously.
And you want to impress him as well.
Yeah. You want to just do right by the play, and, you know, just have fun. And yeah, so
I think someone having that, because I had a similar a teacher in my life, and just being so inspired by the integrity that she had as a person as well as an artist, and how important that is to sort of, I don't know, keep you grounded, whether you're walking to the shops or whether you're stepping on stage to tell a story. You know, I was so inspired by that sort of discipline and honoring whatever the task is in front of you, and making sure you do said task justice within your own realm. I think that's a really inspiring quality to have. So yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, we've sort of obviously touched on the early days, but I remember thinking the first, I mean, I loved Peter Pan. Peter Pan, genuinely, and I'm not just saying this. I thought it was the best version, like the live action version that they've done. I just loved that film, especially as a kid. Like, I've always loved Peter Pan, and that was, I worked with Rachel as well, and and I was fangirling when I met her as well. I was like, I love that. I genuinely love that film. I'm not just saying that. But what a way to start. And I mean, I remember thinking that whole cast, because I was like looking into it, like, where are these kids from? Like, who are they? And seeing that a lot of the people on that film were British, was inspiring for me at the time. I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, but like, I was kind of on the cusp of starting my journey as an actor, and that is an inspiring thing. And I did, for some reason, it just by chance, I kind of kept note on all the people that were in that film, because I was interested to see where they would go and what they would do. And I remember thinking the first film that I saw you in that I was like, I recognize that guy. He was in Peter Pan. Was Private Peaceful.
Yeah.
A great film. Jack O'Connell as well, who I think is brilliant too. But that, I mean, getting to work with, was it Richard Griffiths?
Yeah.
Richard Griffiths, and that's a wonderful little, like, kind of, I guess, fairly low budget film, but that part, that's an incredible role. Those two roles. How was the filming for that? Was that, I mean, I'm probably completely wrong here, but was that one of your first kind of roles that was like an adult role, and it was a lead, and how was that as an experience?
That was really, really important in terms of, like, it was one of the first jobs as an adult. It was the first one as one of the leads as well, and it was also a part that I felt very close to in myself as well. Of course, like, certain surface level differences, like accent and, you know, historical context and geographical context, but as a person, apart from that, but as a person, I felt akin to a lot of what Tomo felt and thought. And I remember feeling that going to the audition and thinking that's a rare feeling, because that's some of the joys that you get to try things on that you don't usually, you know, characters that are different to you. But I remember thinking, like, I know this fella. And Pat, the director, was so lovely about just, like, it was always like, just, you know what you're doing, you know, just kind of just do your thing, and, like, was really calm. But that feeling of very simply being on set much more, like, you know, that thing of being there most days. Like, there was a chunk of time where obviously the story split between, you know, the characters when they're younger and when they're older, and so there was a good bit of time that we weren't there. But being there with Jack, who is such a fantastic actor and someone that I do, and at the time as well, you know, really looked up to, and do now, but like as a sort of, when you felt like you were with your peer, and like Jack had done a lot of work that I knew, and like exciting work and brilliant work. And so to be working with Jack, to feel a sort of ownership over what you're doing because you're there every day, and to kind of feel a more tangible, essentially, like, because everyone for whether you're on it for like a single scene or the whole thing, or any sort of member of the crew or cast, everyone is essential. But I think it was a more tangible sense of being part of something, being there more often, and that feeling and the kind of like whatever that sort of was really profound. And I kind of wanted to sort of to be a part of that feeling more. And again, but I was very lucky that I kind of had that feeling on someone where I kind of like, I feel like most situations I'd react the same way, you know. So you sort of, and that was really interesting as an acting experience as well, to kind of feel like, you know, the character. And I guess some of the time that's when like you hear, that's now has made me want to sort of work harder at trying to get to know them more now, so to almost get that feeling of what it was like to play Tomo, because I kind of was like, yeah, no, I've had that experience. Yeah, cool. Like, even if it happened 100 years later and in a different part of England, I feel like I've had that same sort of happening in some of the happenings. So that was really important, and that project really meant a lot to me.
Was that I mean, everyone has little kind of triumphs, little milestones and game-changing moments in their career. Was that one of them then? What would you reckon that was a kind of a moment where you're like, this is, you know, kind of a reaffirming of, you know, I want to do this. This is great. And this was a really good film to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it was a kind of personal, but in a personal sense. But then again, just in terms of like talking about sort of things like, I don't know, like I'm wary of sort of like, I know what you mean by sort of things like milestones, but that's kind of, they're only kind of personal acknowledgements, because I think so much of, you know, the other stuff is kind of, that's someone else's perspective on the situation, which is out of your control. But
that's a really good point to bring up, because I think a lot of actors are terrible at that, and the fact you're acknowledging that is, I mean, it is difficult, isn't it? Because you do sometimes you wander off and you think about, you compare yourself to other people, or you can think about what people think of you because of the things you've been in. And the fact you've said that, every job is an experience, no matter if the film does well, no one sees it, or it does great. And sometimes it's hard. I look at jobs and I think, I had a great time on that job, but no one saw it. Or you kind of, I know I go a little bit mad thinking about these things, but that's a very good, strong point to look at it from, I think.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think it's that, like, that ultimately the experience is only ever really going to be yours and the people that you shared it with. And you might do it for the sense of, you know, telling the story that hopefully other people will share in, but they'll share in something different. They'll share in the final product, which of course your thing is to sort of is about the making of that. I don't want to say product, but the making of that piece. And that's the only bit that you'll truly know, you know, and no one else will know that bit. So as long as that bit means a lot to you and is done for your own, you know, right reasons, then that's grand. And then it's sort of, but of course it's a wonderful thing if then that feeling is then shared by the reception of the piece. But again, that's out of your control. The only thing that, you know, there's any sort of control over is kind of why you do it in the first place, I guess. You know, and the happening that it is as well, and the sort of the present time on the set.
Would you, once you've done a job, is it kind of like, that's done now, my part is done, kind of leave it where it is, great experience, and then kind of move forward?
I try to. I mean, I think of course as I get older, there's an element of understanding also the sort of the part of the job that is supporting the film, like, you know, afterwards, and that there is work to be done, but that's such a different, I think. I'm just wary of kind of like, I think that's something that just kind of, I wouldn't sort of enter into, like, you know, that bit happens after making the job in the first place. So if you've got an eye on that before you've started, then you're already looking kind of, you've leapfrogged it. You've leapfrogged the experience itself. And so I think that's something that is to be acknowledged and is to be sort of aware of, but not until that step comes, kind of thing, you know, like, just it's at first it's the audition, then it's the project itself and the prep for it, then it's the filming, and then you sort of, it will be put in front of you what's required in terms of supporting the story, and that of course is vital, but that's secondary to all those other things, just because literally in sense of time it is all that other stuff literally comes before.
I guess, when people see a film, they see the finished thing, and it's like, oh, it seems all, it's there, it's finished, it's done.
Yeah.
And there's so many steps to it, and so many people involved, and the crew, the cast, the production, everything else. It's amazing how much goes into a film, and especially some of the films you've done, the bigger budget ones as well. It's like it's an army of people that have made these films, and sometimes when you see the credit list, it just keeps going. And when it comes to, I presume, obviously you're in a really great place in your career right now. I presume you still audition for things, and it's still, it's still a grind, still, trying to persuade people that you're right for the role. What is that for you? Like, if you're lucky enough to get a role, what is the deciding factor to doing a job? Is it, obviously the people that you're working with? What are the key elements that make you excited about doing the project?
I think it's as you say, still sort of fighting for each job, each project. But I think the things when it's a mixture of a kind of like personal and bigger picture, in terms of like, obviously every member of the crew and cast is a sort of cog in the big machine of the story, and so just personally, whether you feel that this is a story that needs to be told, and that's kind of fundamental. And then it's sort of, if the story is, then it's kind of like, okay, where do I fit into the telling, and how can I best serve the telling? So it's the story first and foremost, and then on a personal level, it's probably an experience thing as well, of like, what do I get to experience in and learn in making this, like, and that might be the form that it takes, be it like a theatre piece or something. I feel like you kind of, I think you kind of have things that you want to learn, and you sort of, I don't know, you kind of know them when you recognize them, but like, it might be a way of working. So like a director I had one job where I was sort of a bit obsessed with kind of the idea of people who kind of become the role and things like that. And then when you have one particular job where the story makes sense to you, but then the director's going, look, I really want you to go in on this. I really want you to disappear into this for 3 months and do all of this. And you kind of go, okay, that's what I want to do. More like on a personal level, I just want to experience what that feels like. And then other times you have projects where, if you've done that and things in your life are taking different shapes, you kind of go, I want to learn how to be able to balance a bit more. So this project is going to be filmed all out of order, and I'm going to have that. So you sort of welcome whatever the project is going to teach you. And but I think you're drawn towards certain experiences. You kind of think, all right, this is what this is going to require, and I want to learn a new skill, or I want to try something I've not done before. But I think the biggest thing is the story, and what the story's saying, what it's about, and what it might be offering up.
So when you mentioned about the varying processes there, because a lot of actors have a particular processes where some might always dive in and live in it for the 6-week shoot or the 4-month run, or whatever it is. You don't have a particular process. It's a question of how you collaborate with the people you're working with, and you're open to whatever that is.
I think it's a bit of both. Like I'm figuring out, there's just things which automatically I think I like to do for myself, which sort of, I guess, become my personal way of doing things. But then that sort of shifts and changes a wee bit depending on the project. And I think it's kind of trying to, I'm learning as well to try and welcome what the learnings of that project is as well, in terms of, because sometimes you kind of have something that you feel works for something in terms of a way of approaching a role, and then it's not applicable to the next role, or it's not healthy for the next role, and then and then by the same token, you might have another. So then you learn another way of working, and then you kind of go, right, okay, that was good actually. So now I'm going to do this one, and then you go, no, actually, I need to go back to that other thing. So it's sort of, I think if you kind of have a few things which I just do for myself, which I know work for me in terms of just not like working like I know this works for the performance, but I know this works for my sort of sense of self. I know that this is a way that I can kind of feel attached to this, but then otherwise also welcome what your director or the context is asking you to do, and the part as well. You know, there might be, and very simply, like when I've not done it for years now, so I'd love to do another one, but I've not done I had a play, and my character sort of talked a lot when he first came on, and so it was just like a whole new learning of vocally being ready, and then it kind of that taught me things which then I took on as to like, okay, why shouldn't I be this ready when I'm onto a film set? Like, why I'm still talking, I'm not talking as much to as big a room, but it's still, I could do at least some of this. And then you play a role that doesn't speak. Then you sort of go, okay, so, but how can I use that sort of commitment to a sort of getting ready to this guy who doesn't speak, but maybe he moves in a certain way. So I'll still, you kind of almost like, I don't know, maybe it's sort of like, not purely in sense of time, but if you kind of go, right, well, I did vocal warm-ups for 45 minutes, but now this guy doesn't speak, but he moves in a different way. So now I'm going to stretch for 45 minutes and just sort of, it's still, you're still doing that same through line of like, I know that I need to give myself 45 minutes to get ready, but the way in which I get ready changes with each role, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
And that in a very simple sense.
Totally.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, as well, it depends on the, you know, if you've got, I had played a part where I was meant to be this guy that hadn't spoken for ages, and he was kind of like worn out, homeless, and like completely ragged. And I would try and obviously go through my lines before I was going to do it, but without speaking them. So that it would almost like my voice would crack when I do and it is like everything is slightly different, isn't it? There's so many different ways to sort of mentally get yourself prepared. But then I felt with that part a little bit, once I did speak, I was surprised by like what was coming out, and then almost can throw you off. So it's, you know, it is a learning process, isn't it? I mean, that's nice that you, because some people have like such a regime, and I like the fact that you're saying that you're open and you kind of depends on the job, and you kind of go with what the team are saying and what other people are doing, and kind of open to trying new things each time, and then, you know, learning something and then bringing that onto the next job. That's interesting. But I mean, we've talked a lot about you obviously working and everything else, but what do you do? Have you got things when you're not working, the downtime? Are there kind of coping mechanisms that you have, or things that you do, like hobbies, to keep yourself sane in between in between jobs?
Or like an 8-month pandemic, just to keep you sane. I mean,
I'm kind of referencing maybe
these things pop up.
The lockdown, like, you know, I think also one thing to sort of say is that there's sort of, for anyone kind of working in this, there's so much work in between to try and get work, you know, to stay practiced, to stay auditioning, and of course people see the jobs that come off, but there are a whole lot of auditions and tapes which don't happen but are vital practice. So that is a huge amount of the downtime. And I think sometimes, you know, if you're lucky enough to get the opportunity to audition, even if the roles don't come off, the audition process is something in itself, is a reason to get out of bed. And that's kind of one thing that I'm sort of really noticed. I mean, you've kind of, I don't know about you, but I feel so sort of, it's oftentimes you feel so well when you're working. You're like, I've got so much energy, I'm doing this stuff. And it's because someone's got like, you've got a place to be at a certain time. It's really, and it's kind of like, I don't know if this is the job or if this is just the fact that I've got somewhere to be at a certain time. It's making me feel so worthwhile, you know, like. And so I write lots of anal lists when I'm not working, to give myself that sense of purpose. So I don't know, it's a mixed bag, just trying to keep in touch with, you know, with loved ones and family and friends. And I like to cook. Not great, but you know, just
that's what I've been doing. Cooking has grounded me throughout all of this pandemic. That's what I started learning to get better at.
What's your
cooking and
dish,
learning.
George?
What's my dish? Oh, like really simple. But I love a roast. But that's the thing, is you just chop it
Oh,
up and put it
baby,
in.
yeah.
But
So
a roast is really hard. There's like every element is different. You got to get it all to come together at the same
no,
time.
not my roast. I mean, that probably speaks volumes about how bad my roasts are. But I just chop it up and we'll put it in for an hour and a half, and then it's ready. Lots of salt. That's how it does.
All
Oh, I
about
love
that.
a roast though.
All
I
about
mean,
that.
we've been living off roasts every Sunday. We've just, because it's kind of like a regime, as you say, like, right, let's do a roast this Sunday. It kind of gives you a little bit of structure. So we've been living off, and every roast we do, we get a different type of meat. So we've just been
Right.
trying different things.
Nice,
It
nice.
definitely helps with keeping sane for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sure.
yeah. Just
But
chopping stuff.
exactly. Obviously, I mean, you do your. I don't know how to pronounce this because I'm an idiot and I'm dyslexic. But Uval dust. Ufal.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Is that how
yeah.
you pronounce it?
Ufu dust.
Ufal dust. Okay.
Yeah.
What does that mean? I'm just wondering. Does it mean anything?
Oh no, it doesn't mean anything.
Okay, good.
It's a
good.
thing from my granddad. It's a made up thing.
Oh,
And
fair enough.
it's a made up dust. It makes things better.
Oh,
So,
amazing.
you know.
I mean, obviously, that's something that you do. I mean, I don't even know how you fit all of that in. And as you know, we were obviously talking before we started recording about the dilemma of having so many people now on Zoom and trying to do it online and everything else. I mean, that's a great little side thing to do and keep yourself busy with. And
Yeah, that's one thing. Yeah, these new writing nights. And it just kind of came about. It's just a lovely thing to do. It's that was just kind of, it's like a platform for people who've got work that they're sitting on or they're working on, and it's it's just a kind of a shared space, because it's amazing how much stuff people are that you wouldn't know people are sitting on, and that's the thing, because everyone only sees the end product after something's published or something's edited or something's, but there's so much of the process that goes before, and there's so much of the process that can benefit from trying stuff out. Like, it's like a rehearsal or a reading that informs it, or a deadline. Again, it's the same thing. And yeah, so there were nights that started in pubs, and I ran them with my mate Freya, and we just kind of like, it's just a chance for people to share work, basically. And it's always wonderful, the stuff that people come up with.
Oh, it's always so interesting as well, because it's all so different.
Yeah.
It's not just one thing. It's poetry, singing, performance. I really, the last one was like a real welcome, like, I get to see new faces and enjoy watching performance. And it was really nice to just see that. It feels like so long. And to be fair, I think the last, I may be wrong, but the last Ufal Dust that I went to in London, which is the one in Waterloo, was that the last live one?
I think so. Yeah.
Because that was literally the last time I went out, and like
I think it was the same for me as well.
So it was such a welcome the other week when you had it back on, and even though it was on Zoom, it was just such a welcome, relax, just watch it, and it was just nice. Oh, there are other people existing in the world right now. I feel like I haven't seen faces. So
with ideas and thank you. That's really kind.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a lovely thing to do. So we'll just keep doing it.
How did that come about? Was that a joint idea with?
It was like a night actually it was years ago. Like, it was a night in a pub with some friends, and they were talking. To be honest, it was like the very first thing it was years and years and years ago, and it was when the Scottish referendum was going on, and in the run up to it. And I was at a pub with some friends, and a lot of them were Scots, and they were talking about the referendum, and they were speaking so articulately and passionately on the subject. I kind of thought, like, wow, I just want to have nights of discussion in pubs. And it sort of felt like that sounded like a bit of a pretentious idea, but I sort of made a promise thereafter with a friend to, like, just put on a night in a pub where people shared work, because also simultaneously I had lots of friends who were writing things but kind of thought, I don't know when it's going to get on, or I don't know when to finish it, and just sort of had unfinished stuff to share, and kind of thought, right, well, if we do this night and offer everyone, kind of whoever wants to do it, it's basically like a kind of slightly curated open mic night. And the first one we did in a pub in Kentish Town and years ago, and it was just really lovely. Like, people came down, and the people watching were so supportive and giving, and the sort of that it was, yeah, it was just really lovely. So we just kind of from then on made a point of going, right, well, let's do this, let's do this more. And just whenever people are free and, you know, kind of not working and there's room to do it, we do it. And
So good.
that's it. It's kind of really, it's really sort of simple and relaxed, really. And it's just it's made by the support that people give it in terms of literally in the room, you know, the supportive nature of those watching, and also the quality of the work that people are, you know, presenting, so, which isn't down to us. That's just proxy of how
Yeah, you're
good
taking all
everyone's
the
stuff
credit
is.
for this, but really,
Yeah.
no. To be fair, I remember one of the nights you went up and performed with other people as well, so you do get involved, and it's just a great thing, and it is inspiring because, you know, a lot of us, you know, if you're writing something or working on something, you just think this might never see the light of day.
Yeah.
But it's nice you give people the opportunity to do
Yeah.
that. I say that I still haven't had the balls to go out and actually.
Well, you should.
follow the-
From now on, let's make a point. You'll be at the next.
Yeah, I know, mate.
You said it now, Elliot.
I
You've got to-
know, I know. But I wanted to ask, regardless of
Yes.
regardless of the part, sorry, of the project, is there a part that has stood out for you in terms of just the character and being able to play that part?
Genuinely, they like every project and every character kind of means a huge amount. But I think probably Ned in the True History of the Kelly Gang, like to play. I mean, it's probably far off the truth of. It's very much an interpretation of Ned Kelly, who was a real person, and there have been a few versions of his story told. But I think because of the process, that was one of the most in-depth processes, which became and was very personal to me. But then as well, in certain ways, kind of, I guess not extreme, but like it was pretty full on as an experience and very varied, and attached to, in a kind of like, yeah, there were sort of connections of even my, you know, going back to my dad's from Australia, and, you know, sort of connecting back to Australia, and it's all like the character, it's all about lineage and fatherhood, and, you know, and sort of what it is to be a man, and sort of, you know, like it's riffing on all of that because because of the legend that is Ned Kelly, and also the idea of kind of creating a legend and sort of why legends are created. There was all these massive big ideas which I find fascinating, but then the sort of immediate nature of it was this really kind of physical, quite full on, like, yeah, kind of like rough, tough kind of experience, which was just as to partake in, which was really amazing. And again, it was sort of a bit like the way I talked about Mr. Parker, like Justin, the director, his respect for, you know, for story, you know, and like how to make a story, you know, you could, without being pretentious, he just like really kind of like, he really believed in it, and he made you believe in it, and he took it, and that sort of like Alex Ferguson kind of like intensity about it, like, you know, I mean, Justin's Australian. I don't know how to describe it. It's just that is one that really there were a lot of moments in that which were kind of personally profound and just really intense and enjoyable and full on, and so that's one that will kind of stick with me, I think, particularly.
I mean, that film, it was such a transformative performance.
Yeah.
I watched it and I remember thinking, whoa. normally I can watch a film and go, yeah, I'd have done that better. But I watched that and went, yeah, fair play, mate. That was
well, that's
incredible.
just challenging you with the MMA fight.
Yeah.
You know all about it.
Oh man, I mean, you were in some decent nick in that film, to be fair to yourself. Like that was, it was no, incredible, very visceral, gritty, like not the sort of character like I would expect to see you play, and that's what made it so good. It was just, you know, so different. And I mean, hats off to you for going into that audition room and convincing that you could do that. And that's the trick, isn't it? Being able to be like, no, I can. You may have seen me do this, but I can do this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what was really
Incredible role.
I feel very, you know, very grateful for Justin for taking a chance. And
Mm.
yeah, it was a fascinating audition. It was like the kind of most full-on audition I've ever had as well. Like it was like an hour of kind of just like this kind of crazy
Wow.
improv, and like everyone, it was just it was intense. And like the whole, uh, yeah, just Justin's way of like doing something completely out of the box to kind of get to the heart of the matter is really brilliant. I think, like our rehearsals, we didn't really do that much on the script, but we formed a punk band and he booked us a gig in a bar in Melbourne. And so for 3 weeks we went in, got changed into dresses and rehearsed punk music.
Wow.
And that sort of that gave us more of the vibe than touching the script.
That's amazing. What an amazing,
That's
such
fantastic.
a off the wall thing.
It was just, and so we'd do rituals with our dresses. We'd sort of like physically kind of get close to fighting. We had this kind of, I remember the first day that we met Ben, who played Red Kelly, Ned's father. And Ben's an incredible musician, but I don't think he'd ever acted before, and he's got this incredible stage presence. He's in this amazing Queensland punk band called 6 Foot Hick, and it's this really visceral kind of androgynous but also like super tough kind of dance and kind of self-flagellating dance. And the first day that we met Ben, he was like, boys, will you play a song for Ben, play your loudest song? So we just started playing this song, and he said, Ben, would you dance for the boys? And we're like, yeah, okay. So Ben just stripped off his shirt and just started dancing for us in the way that only he can. And we're all and then he was like, right, George, take your top off, go dance with him. So then I was just like dancing with my father, sort of like skin to skin with like all the other boys. And it was just like, so, but at the end of that dance, he was like, okay, that's the vibe. Yeah, that's the, and it was sort of like, okay, right. I felt what the energy of these people is and are, but it's kind of not what's on the page, but that's how we had to sort of attack the page, if you know what I meant. It's sort of, yeah, that's all Justin, that's Justin. And he'd just give you like different contexts for scenes as well. He'd give you a subtext that was completely outside, that was sort of seemingly completely outside of the scene, but would give it a quality that was completely at the heart of, like, I remember the audition, and he was like, there was the first scene I did was between me and my mum. And it's sort of a bit like, where have you been kind of thing? You've not been home. Sort of, she's, I guess, in anyway, testing him a little bit. And he's going, well, I'm doing my own thing. And so I started playing it and sort of quite down the line. And he went, okay, no. And he got me to the lady I was reading opposite to just look at her first, just really kind of like take space away from the text. And he said, okay, now play it like you guys are on a first date. Like, you're not mother and son. You're just kind of that thing of like, you're kind of, are we joking here? Like, I can't gauge this sort of energy. What is this? Are you making fun, or is this a little bit, this sort of flirtatious kind of energy? And we just played it as that, not as mother and son, but just with Justin's understanding that as soon as I called her Ma at the end of the scene, it kind of cemented us in this capsule of the context, but with an energy that was completely other than what you'd expect a mother and son to have. That's just Justin, Justin's cleverness and brilliance as a director to kind of let you trust that you can be completely outside the box, and that if he frames it, not literally in a sort of, well, sometimes literally, but if you kind of frame it with the names and the places of a certain thing, you can be playing something completely other than what's inside of the conversation that you're having, which is just, it was really interesting to kind of learn. And it feels like, that's true of situations in life, and how people, what's underneath stuff.
What a fun way to go about it as well. And that must have been a great experience. I mean, I guess you were in Australia again for that one.
Yeah, back in Australia. And that was just Justin and Essie, his wife, who played Essie Davis, who's amazing, who played Ellen Kelly, my mum. They just really opened themselves up as well. And I stayed with them for a wee while beforehand. And yeah, there was all this, we did all this prep, and then basically the money fell through. So we kind of came home, and he said, oh no, actually we will try and we'll get it back up in 6 months time. And so it's sort of, again, again, you sort of have the final process, the final piece is what it is, kind of because of all those happenings which are out of your hands, that actually the whole process got extended by 6 months because none of us really let go of it, although we sort of, so everyone got that little bit stronger because we were doing that, you know, we stuck to the plan for that 6 months. And that, again, people just see the end result, but there are all these ups and downs in them which kind of made it what it was. And you know, and the fact that we came back and it was the budget was half of what it was, it made it kind of all the more punky because suddenly we couldn't have a town square. It had to be 3 men in the woods with 1 horse, like, you know, rather than like, you know, in a big saloon town with a big gravel street. It was, and it changed the energy of the film to be what it was. But yeah, so it's, yeah, I don't know.
You touched on earlier about the, you know, taking on roles and the physicality. I remember you mentioning, I think it was at the night in Waterloo on Uveldust, about a film you were doing. I don't know if you ended up doing it or finishing it because of Corona and everything else, but you were really excited about the physicality of it. I believe it was Wolf.
Yeah.
Wolf? Did you end up getting to finish it? You did. Amazing.
We made it, which was grand. So I'm not sure. I know that Natalie, the director, is they're just in post-production now. So I'm not sure kind of what the plan is in terms of, you know, how it is released and everything. But I know that was such a special project. And again, it was amazing getting to work with this amazing, well, he's kind of does everything. He's a movement coach, actor in his own right. Like he's everything. He's called Terry Notary. And have you seen that film, The Square? You know, about it's just, I think it's a man who did Force Majeure. I think it's Swedish, and it's about the art world. And there's this amazing scene where this fella comes in and he's a kind of performance artist, and he comes in as an ape and he walks as on these sort of arm extenders, but he won't stop being an ape at this dinner. This kind of like, and it just escalates and it becomes really dangerous because he doesn't stop being in, like, and that's Terry, that man.
I haven't seen the film, but I've seen that clip and it's incredible.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah. And everyone's just like, what? I wonder if the people in that room were aware that was going to happen, because genuinely they looked terrified.
They looked terrified. Like but Terry was sort of, we had this amazing process, and he was so wonderful. It's about this I play this man who feels that he is a wolf, and so there's elements of movement in the film that we had to figure out without kind of giving too much away, that sort of, you know, where because he is a wolf, you know, but he is also in the body that he is. So it's kind of that was just a real joy working with Terry on that, and again figuring out, it's like, without sort of getting too pretentious again, like kind of what it is to be wild, you know. That's okay. Is it just, how do we not make it look like someone who's doing an impression of being wild? Like, what is it to think like an animal? If you have, of course, we can't actually. It was just like any character. You're gonna go, okay, what's it like to think like this person? But now we're thinking about, what's it like to think like this wolf? Like, you know. So it was.
Was that a long process, or did it get shortened because of the pandemic?
Again, we were sort of actually really aided by, we'd done 1 week's rehearsal, and then we had scheduled to take 2 weeks off and then do 3 weeks with all the cast rehearsing together. But we had sort of 1 week of Terry and Natalie, the director, Terry, Natalie, and I sort of figuring out this, my character together. And then in that 2 weeks, the lockdown happened, the first lockdown, sorry. And so we the film was delayed until the summertime, but across that time I could practice a lot of that movement, which made it a completely different thing to if we had so I kind of came into that 3 weeks much more ready than if I had had 2 weeks off, and kind of physically, being able to sort of get fit for it. So it was again, that's just sort of, at the time it wouldn't have been what you sort of asked for, but that time was kind of actually in some senses a blessing, albeit for a kind of, a terrible happening. But it was sort of, it's sometimes just, that's the way, the way things work out sometimes lend themselves to the production.
A little part of the hopes that you you were preparing, but also watching things like Teen Wolf just to, get ready for that.
Not so much Teen Wolf, but my YouTube history is just like every documentary there is on wolves.
Yeah, I can
I've gone
imagine.
through a lot of old school National Geographic.
Well, when you talk about that sort of thing, though, I do you look back at some films like that, and you just think, I love that you're putting in the time, the effort, the work, and the homework. Because when you think of a film like Teen Wolf, you just think, I don't think anyone thought about the physicality.
Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? There are different types of films, but no, I love that. I think it's such a great thing that when you go into a job and you get to learn new things, or a new physicality, or a tick, or all these kind of little elements you can bring into your character to make it richer. But yeah, George, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on and just having a chat and being open to it. And it's really interesting, and it's always inspiring to hear you talk about these things. So thank you.
No, thanks very much for having me. It's lovely.
I want to
be in the
ask
mix.
one more question.
Yeah.
Just a stupid question, but what's the, not necessarily even on set, but just like, I know I've got moments where I just think, God, what is there a moment that you can tell us about that was like the most embarrassing moment on set? Like just a moment that you think was just, one of those moments you think, oh my God, I want to crawl after it. I'll give you an example. I'll tell you what mine was. So that you don't feel so much pressure.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So I'll go back
to the embarrassment level here.
yeah. Gauge it. Don't take it too far. Okay. So I'll go mid-range, tame. But when I was getting into acting, I went to a weekly kind of drama class thing that was out of school on the weekends. And I remember the first day I went, I was in this big room with a load of people I didn't know, and we were all sitting cross-legged. I was quite young. I think I was probably about 8 or 9 years old at the time. First time, nervous with all these people, and the teacher's at the front of the thing, and she's introducing all the new people that have come that weekend, and it's like this dead silence. And I'm trying to, I want to make a good impression because my first lesson. And for some reason, my mom was there for the first. She was just there watching. And I was sitting there cross-legged, and it was a very, very shiny, very kind of wooden floor that was very kind of very open room with a lot of acoustics. And there was this bit of silence, and I was holding in a fart, and I did it, and it reverberated off the floor. And I remember it was just this was like the beginning of my acting, life, trying to get in and get involved. And I was just like, oh. And I remember my mum just being like, just watching me. And there was a sliding doors moment there though, because I nearly didn't go back because I was so embarrassed. I was like, okay, I'm going to persist. I don't know, that was my first kind of embarrassment, and there's been many, but that was
I think it's a really I kind of want mine to be a fart story now. I'm just trying to think of. I don't know. It sounds sort of like kind of more. There's been many times, but I just remember I did a job that was it was a musical film, and just as a sort of like just in general, like and we kind of all were cast in this musical, and we get sung in the audition, but we're also very nervous about singing. And we got to the read through, and they was introducing everyone. Dexter, the director, was like, "Okay, we got this is Roddy, who'll be playing guitar for the songs." And we're like, "Whoa, sorry, we're singing in the read through." And he was like, "Well, yeah, it's a musical." Oh my God, what?
God.
And and there was a sort of and of course that's what was required, but it ended up being a really good sort of lesson, because I went for this note. It was in the rehearsals, actually, not the read through. We went for it, and I really went for this note, because it was one of those ones that you have the belt to reach. And just soared past it, just missed it horribly. I mean, it was sort of just like, but like full on shouting, like. And it was such a sort of. It was so out there, like it was such a kind of launched into this completely wrong note, and like, and it was just such a hard fall that actually it was kind of the worst happened, so to speak. And everyone afterwards was kind of like, oh, well, that happened, but
It's done now. It's out of the
now
way.
it's happened. It's never going to be as bad as that. It was never going to be such a big miss as that one. So that was sort of like, I guess the moral is it's kind of miss hard, but fart on the floor, but come back next week. Miss the note, but try and aim at it next time. Like,
and on that roundup, I think that's a great way to finish. No, thank you, George. Really appreciate it. That's brilliant. I mean, you've got to give it the beans. That's the thing. You've got to give it, or
maybe you don't need to give it the beans.
Yeah, maybe I should stop the beans.
Maybe
I
beans is your
think
problem.
strong and wrong is always the best way to go.
Yeah, just just go for it.
Just go for it.
Thank you to our guest George, and thank you Sam for coming on and having a chat. We're a small independent podcast, so we hugely appreciate your support and word of mouth. Thank you for listening to A Life in Film. We hope we carry a positive message to those of you starting out, those of you who are veterans in the industry, and those of you who are simply fascinated by film.
It's a life in film. It's a life in film. It's a life in film. It's a life in film. It's a life in film. It's a life in film. It's a life in film. And you better come back next month to A Life in